my channel. My name is Rick and I'm a wildlife photographer from the East Midlands in the United Kingdom. In this, my first ever video, I will discuss what you need to know about starting wildlife photography. I myself have been photographing wildlife, or should I say birds, for the past 15 or so years. And I can say it's very challenging, but it's also great for your health, both physically and mentally. So, let's get started. Right, so let's look at the equipment. I can only give examples of the Nikon equipment at the moment because I don't have access to any others, but Canon and Sony are included in the most popular products. You are going to need a camera body and a camera lens. So let's look at the camera bodies first. DSLR camera bodies, or digital single lens reflex, are still popular. They are not dead yet, but mirrorless are becoming more popular and more mainstream. There are some major differences between the two, and at first glance the mirrorless looks the same and works the same as DSLRs. In this image of a Nikon Z7 II, side by side with a D850, the Z7 II is smaller and lighter than the D850. However, they are similar in technical aspects. They both use the same batteries, they both have the same full frame sensor, and very similar performance for the same price. DSLR viewfinders are optical. However, because they use a mirror, when taking pictures you can hear the mirror slap as you take more and more pictures. Whilst mirrorless viewfinders are electronic, they both have the same or similar LCD screens. On some mirrorless bodies the electronic viewfinders black out in between shots. However, the more pro bodies such as the Z9 do not black out. DSLR and mirrorless bodies have different autofocus systems though. The main difference is that DSLRs have focus point sensors around the centre area, whilst mirrorless have focus points all over the frame. Some mirrorless bodies have subject detection systems recognising people, animals and cars. The Z9 can also recognise birds too with the new firmware. I mentioned full frame sensors earlier, but there is another sensor system called APS-C, or referred to as crop sensor. These sensors are smaller than a full frame, and as we can see here, they give the impression of being closer than a full frame. You will find crop sensors in DSLR and mirrorless bodies too. I will explain later how these affect lenses. So now that mirrorless systems are becoming more popular, this means that there are excess DSLR bodies on the second-hand market at bargain prices. Next, you're going to need a lens. Now this is where you need to make a wise choice. Again, the most popular choices for DSLRs are Nikon and Canon. There are some third-party manufacturers that produce lenses for those two, being Sigma and Tamron. When it comes to mirrorless cameras, again we've got the top three are Nikon, Canon and Sony. Once again here, often there are third-party manufactured lenses from Tamron and Sigma. This is where you need to make the wisest choice within your budget. There are two types of lenses that you need to consider: zoom lens and primes. Zoom lenses have a variable focal length, such as 100mm to 600mm. This varies the magnification. The advantage here is that you can zoom out to full focal length for smaller subjects or zoom in for larger subjects. Generally, the disadvantage is that zoom lenses produce images that are less sharp than the second option, namely prime lenses, although not by much. Prime lenses have a fixed focal length, such as 300mm or 500mm. For DSLR bodies you need a lens that has the same mount type. For Nikon DSLR that is an F mount. Canon lenses have something the same, but I'm not too sure what they're called. Nikon bodies also have a subtype to the F mount, i.e. FX and DX. The DX type lens are specific to DX bodies. If you mount a DX lens to an FX body, you get vignetting of the corners, i.e. they are either darker or black. FX lenses with both FX and DX bodies are no problem. Usually the minimum focal length used for wildlife photography is at least 500mm. I mentioned APS-C or crop sensors earlier, and with the effect of being closer than full frame. Lens focal lengths are quoted a particular number for full frame bodies, while crop sensor bodies have the effect of multiplying that focal length by 1.5 for Nikon, or 1.6 for Canon, I believe. So a focal length 500mm on a full frame is 500mm. On a crop sensor body, it has an equivalent focal length of 500 multiplied by 1.5, i.e. 750mm. A zoom lens is quite adequate to get started with. Me personally, I have 100, 300, 500 and an 800mm. Everything I have mentioned also applies to mirrorless bodies, except the lens mount is a Z mount type. Now in the case of DSLR bodies, you cannot mount a mirrorless mount lens to a DSLR body. But you can mount a DSLR designated lens, such as Nikon F mount, to a mirrorless Z body with an adapter. There is also a type of lens accessory that you can attach in between the body and lens called an extender or teleconverter. This then adds an extra magnification factor overall. Typically, these are at a factor of 1.4 or 2 times. So a 1.4 teleconverter on a 500mm lens gives you 700mm lens. A 2 times teleconverter doubles it, so 500mm gives 1000mm. But there is a trade-off here. This reduces light and degrades image quality, but not by much. I would only recommend a teleconverter until you are entirely familiar with your setup. If you start with a DSLR option, generally cheaper than a mirrorless similar setup, you can upgrade to a mirrorless body next, whilst you can keep all your old existing lenses. Well, that concludes my very basic introduction to wildlife photography. If you want to be notified of any further videos that I produce on this channel, please subscribe and tap the bell at the bottom to be notified of new videos as they turn up. So all that needs to be said now is thank you very much. Cheerio.